Hi everyone, hope you're doing well during this really difficult time. So due to these circumstances, I'm recording my nutrition and exercise for bone health talk right here in my room, and I'm going to link in the PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint's going to come up onto the screen now, but you'll still be able to hear my voice throughout. And also at the end, I'll include my email. I, like most of us, have suddenly got a lot of time. So if you do have any questions or you want to reach out and say whether you enjoyed a part of it or if you found it useful or if it at least passed about 20 minutes for you, then please let me know and get some contact going. Anyway, really hope you enjoy this presentation. So let's make a start then. So that's me, Ben Steele-Turner, along the bottom. And yeah, welcome to the talk again. Nutrition and exercise and how that's going to link to the health of our bones. And yeah, we'll tie that all the way through together for you. Just a quick thing before we start. This talk isn't aimed to give individual advice. You shouldn't take individual health or medical care advice. This is purely to provide some background information. I've designed it in a way that's very simple. It's very easy to understand. If you've just finished a degree in nutrition, you're going to find this super basic. It's based for all ages and just for anyone to maybe find out a little bit. So it doesn't go in super amounts of detail and it's just supposed to be very generalized. But if you have any specific questions at all, then my email, like I said, will be at the end. So please let me know. So this is my background. That's a picture of me. Originally, I was a personal trainer before going to uni. But then studied physiotherapy between 2014 and then finished in 2017. And I was always really interested in how the physical aspects and nutrition would tie together. So I went back and did a master's degree and finished that a year later. And then in my spare time, I've done some bodybuilding competitions. So yeah, you're getting the gist that this sort of subject is kind of what my life revolves around. So I'm pretty interested in it. Today we will cover the bone, anatomy, function, exactly what it's going to do. So we're understanding why it's so important and why it's definitely worth looking after whatever age you are. What impact obviously the diet has and how crucial, as you can tell by that tick, exercise is going to be for bone health throughout our entire life. So what is bone? It's a growing living tissue. I think a lot of people, they think that it's almost innate, like it's not a living structure. And you see those skeletons like you would have at the doctor's or in your science classroom at school, but it's actually a living tissue. It's moving, it changes day to day, so it definitely responds to lifestyle factors that go on. It's mainly collagen. Collagen's a protein. You might have heard of it in skin, hair, nails, and again that's going to respond to exercise, it's going to respond to diet, it's going to respond to stress, etc., day-to-day things, and it's not just something that you're born with. It grows and it stays as it is. But calcium, obviously an essential mineral for humans. Over 99% of your body's store is in your bones, and I believe most of the other 1% is in your teeth, which also counts as your skeleton, I believe. So what does bone do? Well, it provides the structure. It's what gives your muscles something to attach to, and then they can contract and gives you movement. It protects your vital organs, particularly your rib cage. So bone's important to look after because it's going to be your bone that's protecting those organs. And also it's going to give that environment, and it's in the bone marrow, so more in the inner bit of your bone, that actually creates your red blood cells. So bone's really important, guys, really important. So it's definitely worth understanding how we can keep them healthy. So this is a way I quite like to look at it, and think of it as your bank account. So if you work with this analogy, it's the bone bank account. There's two types of cells. So bones is constantly forming, and that's osteoblasts and osteocytes. So they're constantly making new bones. And then at the same time, you've got these guys, osteoclasts. And these guys are constantly getting rid of the old bone, and then the osteoblasts and osteocytes, so these are the bone forming cells, are making new bone. So if it were a bank account, these guys, they love paying money in. They're savers. They want to be building new bone tissue, making it thicker, or making have a higher bank account. These guys, they're spenders. They want to take money out. So what we want to do is improve and increase the activity of these osteoblasts and osteocytes, so these bone forming cells, and then also provide an environment where the bone resorbing cells, the osteoclasts, aren't working so much. And that's how we're going to have a greater bank account, or more money in the bank, or thicker, denser bones with with better cells in that are going to be stronger for us to live day to day. So this graph, during our life, bone density changes hugely. So when I say density, what I mean is thickness, like how thick is the bone. Obviously, if you can imagine like an Aero chocolate bar that's full of bubbles, the smaller the bubbles, the smaller amount of air, and the thicker, the more chocolate there actually is, or the more money in our bone bank account, the less likely we are to end up with fractures or osteoporosis, which we'll come to a bit later on. So as you can see, as you come up into puberty, the dashed area is male, and then the solid blue is female. There's a sudden rise in bone mass, and that's where your bone density, obviously, you're growing, and it suddenly gets denser and denser. And then sometimes around the late 20s into maybe the early 30s is when you hit peak bone mass, and you can see that's higher for males than it is for females. So what's really important is that before this age, you're actually getting the highest possible peak bone mass, because one thing we know is that the higher that is, that peak bone mass, that way as it goes down as we come into middle and older age, we can go further and still have a higher bone mass. And you can see where menopause is marked. Unfortunately for women, menopause doesn't have the greatest effect on bone health, and so you do get that sharp decline where bone health comes down. So that makes it even more important for the women out there to get that peak bone mass as high as possible, and that's really done in your early years. Doesn't mean it can't be maintained, that approach to it throughout your life. It is harder, obviously, as you get older, but you've still got to be doing those things that are going to make it better. So up to around 30, we're in net income. So those green cells, they're paying money in, they're saving up for the future, and we're generally building bone quicker than we're taking it out. And after this, those osteoclasts, those red cells that just came up, they like to withdraw and start spending and take money out. So our withdrawals become bigger than our deposits. So you can imagine that amount in your bank coming down. So we want to help those green guys out that are building the cell up and slow the osteoclast, these red cells, down. They're not really green and red. They're just the images I chose, just so you know. So how's our diet going to affect? So energy balance. So this is really, really simple. This is the amount of calories you're eating each day. And so we're looking at if you're not eating as many calories or you're burning more calories than you're eating, is this going to have an effect on our bone? Well, it does seem to be that short term, if you were to suddenly only eat 500 calories a day of whatever food that would be, then markers of bone formation, so that's how much money we're paying into the bone, definitely seem to go down and make these lower. So we're building bone at a slower rate. And then it's very, very, very probable that if you were to continue that long term, so you were to almost be starving yourself, then yeah, your bone mass would definitely decrease as a result, and obviously this really wouldn't be good for overall health. But one thing that's probably important to note is that if you're suddenly only eating 1,000 or 500 calories a day, this is probably also meaning your body's not getting enough essential micronutrients, enough minerals, and probably that's having an effect, as well as the reduced energy. One thing that can maybe slow or reduce the effect of this is putting load for it. So as you can see, this girl running, doing some exercise, making that bone work, which we'll come to a little bit later on, is definitely going to offset that effect, maybe if you're going through a period of time where you're not eating quite as much food as you would like. So, dietary protein. I'm going to start with this, bear with me, but I'm going to take you through the old hypothesis. So as you can see from the reference down the bottom, 1981, and this is kind of what used to be thought of what would happen if you would eat a really high protein diet. So this idea of acid load. So if you remember from school, pHs, and alkaline and acid, high protein foods, meats, poultries, they are quite acidic. And the hypothesis, the idea was that you would then have to have a lot of calcium or alkaline food to neutralize the pH. And so what this was based off was the evidence where they'd look at someone's urine. HPD means high protein diet. You look at someone's urine after they've been on a high protein diet, and you found that actually it had lots of calcium in. So the idea at the time was that this calcium was being taken out of the skeleton, out of your bone. So therefore your bone account was having more withdrawals, so it's getting thinner, in order to neutralize the acidity of the muscle, neutralize the acidity of that high protein diet. And it's not really correct, but it does provide a basis for the thinking now and how they came about showing that differently. Intake of protein does not strictly correlate. I've seen no evidence that more protein equals bone loss. Actually, there's quite a lot of evidence later on that if you eat more protein, what this actually does is intake calcium absorption. And then the reason there's a picture of an atom isotope there is the evidence that they did to prove this is really, really clever. Basically, they labeled specific types of calcium. This was calcium isotope 47, so they could trace that specific calcium. You then give someone a high protein diet with that specific type of calcium, so you know, okay, I can trace this in their urine, and this would be different to the calcium that's already been stored in their bone. And then after someone's been on a high protein diet, they found that the calcium that higher calcium that was then in their urine, that was that 47 isotope calcium. So what's happening is, before they saw the increased calcium, and thought that had been leached from the skeleton, and that wasn't strictly true. Actually, probably the diet was then encouraging a lot more calcium to be absorbed, but then being passed out rather than being stored. So it's not as bad as we think. And overall, protein generally has an anabolic. So what I mean by that is a building effect of the body, and probably making sure you have enough protein in your diet is overall going to be really, really good for your bone health. But this doesn't mean you should eat solely meat. So if your diet looks like these 4 pictures here and it's just meat, probably not a good idea. While the acid alkaline hypothesis is not particularly modern, you definitely still want loads of plant-based foods, and you do want a healthy mix of the two. Your diet should be based around plants, but definitely that protein from meat sources or vegan sources, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, are definitely going to be really, really important for giving your body both the protein and also the micronutrients available in the plant food. So calcium is probably the most well-known go-to mineral when it comes to bone health, and for very good reason. A lot of your 99%, as we said, of your body's calcium is in your bones, so of course it's going to be really important. You're unable to produce calcium yourself, so you have to consume it. What's really important to understand with calcium is the idea of homeostasis. So your body is interested in how much calcium is in your blood, and that's between 90 and 100 milligrams per litre, and your body does not like it if the calcium goes below that 90. So if it gets to 89 or below, or it gets to 101 or above, your body doesn't like it. So it's either going to try and get more calcium into the blood, or it's going to try and get calcium out of the blood. So what that means is, if you've got plenty of calcium in your diet and your blood calcium is high, that calcium then gets put into your bones, which is those green cells, those bone forming cells, and that's going to make the bone stronger. It's going to make it denser. It's going to make it less likely to fracture. Oppositely to that is if your blood calcium is low. In this situation, your body wants to get back to that range where it really, really likes. So it would either take calcium potentially from the bone, or calcium that you've taken because you've had a nice, healthy, all-round diet, and then it would put that back in the blood. So that shows the importance of the diet there. You need that calcium. If you've been low for a while, that calcium needs to come from the diet, and that's going to go back into the blood, rather than it coming from the bones. I know this is different to the protein I talked before. This is blood calcium as opposed to urinary calcium that they were measuring, which allowed them to come up with the protein hypothesis. So in the blood, it can be taken from the bone, the calcium, but yeah, this is what we want. We want blood calcium to be at that right level, and if it's too high, then a little bit extra might get stored in the bone, and any excess that your body can't handle with or doesn't need at that time, then that will get passed out in the urine. Great calcium sources, obviously well known, are your yogurts, cheeses, milks, dairies. Green veg is also a super, super good source. Any green leaf vegetable is going to be absolutely packed full of really healthy calcium for you. Fish, particularly fish where you eat the bones, so tinned fish, mackerel, sardines, that's going to be a really, really good source of calcium for you. If you are what you eat, as they always say, eating strong fish bones is obviously going to make your bones stronger as well. And then also tofu, nuts, soybeans, these are going to be pretty decent calcium sources for you to get as well. So, vitamin D, this obviously goes side by side. We know that vitamin D and calcium are really, really important and work together incredibly strongly. So, what this does is stimulates bone matrix formation. And by matrix, I mean intercellular substance. So, this is in each cell. This is what's making the cell strong and making that bone really nice and dense. So, we want to stimulate that to get made in each cell. And the calcium metabolism, so how your body is actually metabolizing and using that calcium that you're taking in, vitamin D is going to regulate that. So it's going to be really, really important for you to have enough vitamin D and calcium. Also, it's going to encourage that calcium absorption. So if you're not getting enough vitamin D, you might be eating enough calcium or getting enough, but you might not be getting it all into your bloodstream and therefore not getting it into the bone as needed. One thing that's probably really important to understand is once you've reached your calcium target for the day, you've got that calcium target, there doesn't really appear to be any evidence at all that then going into excess calcium is going to be beneficial. You'll just pass it out. So think of it rather than, okay, I've got calcium, I can get more. No, you've got your calcium, you've hit the bullseye on that target, and then vitamin D is a separate target. You need to get bullseye in both. You can't get more from one or the other, you just need to get enough of both of them, and that's going to be really, really important for you. So the guidance with vitamin D, 10 to 20 minutes of sunlight, and this is between April and September if you live in the UK. So at that certain latitude above the equator, in the winter months, it doesn't matter. It's like trying to put a CD in a VHS player. It's just not going to play, even on really, really sunny days. If it's Christmas Day, you won't be getting any vitamin D. So that leads me on to the next point. UK guidelines, 10 microgram supplement really probably should be taken by almost all individuals on a daily basis, particularly during those winter months. In the summer, if it's sunny, get out and get some sun, and that's definitely going to provide you with enough vitamin D. And also maintaining a healthy BMI. So actually something that a lot of people don't realise is in body fat, vitamin D gets sequestered. Sequestered is just a really fancy word for saying taken away. It gets hidden in the body fat. And so therefore it's not available for your body to use because your body fat, or we call it adipose tissue, takes that vitamin D before it can be used. So that's another reason to keep a nice healthy body composition. And high vitamin D foods, just like with the calcium, the oily fishes, that they come together. It's a perfect natural supplement, if you like, full of everything you need. Eggs, particularly the yolk, mushrooms as well, and the idea that if you leave mushrooms on the windowsill in the sunlight, assuming it's the summer months, then yes, I do believe the vitamin D content will increase a little bit. But the form of vitamin D in mushrooms may not be quite so readily available to the body as an animal source such as the fish might be. And then I've sneakily added the supplement image back in there just to reinforce that probably a 10 microgram supplement wouldn't definitely not be a bad idea for you if you live in the UK. So magnesium, again, pretty well known for bone health, but doesn't get quite such the amount of media attention as calcium does. Their metabolisms are linked. So if you disturb one, if you were to go rapidly into excess and maybe take 10 calcium supplements in one day, then this is definitely going to negatively affect the other, and this makes sense as to why they're both in similar food sources. And the evidence is definitely less strong on magnesium than it is in calcium. It hasn't been covered as much, but it does appear that the homeostasis, much like that calcium balance, is really, really important. And there is some evidence that shows both if your magnesium levels are low or too high, then decreased bone mass. I know of a study where high magnesium actually was linked with increased fractures of the wrist, I believe, but don't quote me on that. So yeah, it's definitely going to be the thing that we want to get optimal, but not be overdoing it for sure. And definitely worth noting, and magnesium is not the only nutrient that this applies for, but things gastrointestinal issues such as Crohn's or irritable bowel syndrome, they would affect the absorption for it, as would taking too much zinc. So if you're taking a zinc supplement every day, that's going to be no good for your bone health. Just take as much as you need, and you can normally get enough from a healthy, balanced diet. And if you're using antibiotics as well, you're not going to be absorbing as much magnesium, so you might need a little bit more in the diet, but definitely don't overdo it. So it really makes sense that generally those same foods that calcium are good or that are good sources for calcium, magnesium are going to be in too. So if you're having a healthy, balanced diet and you're getting at least a couple of portions of these food sources per day, you're going to be absolutely fine. But like I said, this isn't to give individual nutrition advice, just to give people a little bit more information. So vitamin K, actually vitamin K is my favourite vitamin, because I think every nutritionist should have a favourite vitamin, and the Danish flags up there just to help you remember how important vitamin K is. If you've ever wondered why the vitamins go A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E, K, I'm sure almost everyone's wondered that, haven't they? It's because 1929, a couple of Danish scientists actually discovered vitamin K, and it was written about in a German journal. They didn't give it a name, they just called it the coagulation vitamin because of how important it is in coagulating blood, and that's spelt with a K in German, so they just called it vitamin K, and it stuck. But anyway, that's just a fun fact to help you remember about this really, really important thing. So there is a large-scale study that showed that supplementing vitamin K could reduce bone mass loss, but later evidence has found actually low blood serum. So if the amount of vitamin K in your blood, which would be representative of how much vitamin K you've been eating, if that's low, then maybe your bone mass loss and fracture rate are not gonna be so good. So you'll be increasing the loss of your bone, or those red cells, those osteoclasts, like I said, are going to be working faster, and as a result, you might have a risk of higher fractures. But definitely not conclusive about supplements. Overdoing supplements with vitamin K, again, is probably not the best idea. And yeah, we should be focusing on diet for vitamin K. Definitely strong evidence that if you make sure you get enough vitamin K, this is going to be really protective of maintaining that bone mass for you. And yeah, risk of osteoporosis definitely goes up if you are not getting enough vitamin K, and so therefore the blood serum of vitamin K is lower. So therefore, this promotes those bone building cells, and inhibits those bone destroying cells, or those ones that want to take all the money out of our bank account. So let's really focus on prioritizing vitamin K in our diet. And I've seen this number thrown around a little bit. 59% of adults in the UK over 65 are actually vitamin K deficient. And the authors who came to this number said that was due to low green vegetable intake, was probably the likely cause of why so many adults were vitamin K deficient. With vitamin K, if you eat excess, if you were to eat 5 broccolis in a day, and you fancied it, then I'll go ahead. But the excess for a short period can be stored in the liver, so you're unlikely to really overdo it. And if you can store a bit in the liver and then not have so much green veg the next day, then that's great. So yeah, green vegetables, that's what you want to be eating for vitamin K. There's no reason not to be getting 2 or 3 portions of nice leafy green veg every single day. So that brings us to exercise. So as you guessed from the start, exercise is going to be really important for maintaining the health of our skeleton. But how? So, is exercise important in bone strength? It is absolutely crucial. I thought I'd get that out, make that clear for the second time, and now back it up and make sure that you're doing not just any exercise, but a variety of exercises are definitely going to really help you out. So here's the scientist, and he's going to give us some reasons why we should be doing exercise. So there's evidence that shows the more active you are during childhood, like we talked earlier with that diagram we looked at with that rapid increase in bone mass through puberty. And actually, it's been said that if you're more active during childhood, even into your 20s and 30s, you can have an 8 to 10% increase in bone mineral content at the hip, I believe that was. So 8 to 10% increased bone mineral content or bone density is absolutely massive, particularly if you then consider this, that a 6.4% decrease in your bone mass in childhood. 6.4 could double your fracture risk as an adult. So if you can get 10% stronger bones, that's definitely what you want to do. So be encouraging kids, young adults to be doing a variety of exercises, and that's going to be putting that load through the bone. And like I said, bones are living tissue. It's not innate, it's not dead, it's living. If you put load through it, then it's going to adapt to that load. It's going to become stronger where that weight, where that pressure, where that impact's gone through the bone. So it's really, really important. This study looks specifically at postmenopausal women, and the impact of the menopausal transition is such that it promotes an environment where those red cells, those cells that want to take bone out of our account, are definitely promoted. So it's not ideal, but this long-term study is really, really interesting. So this followed women up every 4 years for 16 years. And it's important to keep this exercise up, not just because you're going to gain you're going to gain bone mass, but you'll slow the reduction in it. So you'll be slowing that curve down and maintaining that as much as possible. And in this group, you can't just do a little bit of exercise and then say, oh, I'm fine now. I've done a year's exercise program. From year 0 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, these people were still seeing positive effects from taking this exercise. So it's definitely a lifestyle choice. It's not just one thing that you can do as a short diet or a short period of exercise plan and then have had the effects. There's definitely real benefits to continuing this long term. This study I find really interesting, and it proved my point really, really well about how important it is. So they got 34 men, average age of 69.9. I think the youngest was about 65 and went up to mid-70s. Every day they had to do 50 hops, so 50 single leg hops on the same leg, and they had to do this for 1 year. So 1 year, every day, 50 hops in a variety of directions for 12 months. And actually, at the end of it, they found in those 34 men, both legs had some increase in bone density. But the exercise leg, so that was the leg that they did those single leg hops in, there were specific points where the bone became denser. So that leg, it reacted to exactly how they were hopping, where the weight was going through. So it's like the perfect study, because the control, what you're comparing it against, is that same person's other leg with the same nutrition, the same day-to-day life. The only difference were those 50 high-impact hops. And as a result, that leg that they were exercising, there were specific points where the bone density had changed. So doing that impact exercise is going to be really, really important for maintaining your bone health. And I'll leave you with this, with the exercise bit. This was the conclusion of a large study on bone health and particularly on resistance exercise, so using weights. And their conclusion was resistance exercise may be the most optimal strategy to improve bone mass in postmenopausal women, middle-aged men, and even the older population. So I really would be encouraging you to try and get down the gym. Get some weights at home. Doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to get done. Lift some weights, again, not heavy, and it's going to really, really help. Even in when you get towards the later years of life, it's going to maintain that bone mass and reduce your risk of fracture, which is going to be so important to you. So, quick mention. Intervertebral discs. So these are the discs between the vertebrae, so the level of your spine. And this is a really interesting study that I came across, and they compared 24 non-athletic people, so these are people that did nigh on no running, 30 people who are regular joggers, so doing up to 20 kilometers a week, and then 25 keen long distance runners. I believe these guys were doing in the region of 40 to 50 kilometers running per week regularly, and they found that generally the more running you did, and the longer you'd been doing it for, the cell matrix, so that content within the cells, this is within those discs that provide that cushioning and force transfer in the spine, was better, and the discs were more hydrated. They had more water in, which meant they took the load through the spine better in those that ran more. So that's a really good idea to think about, that your body, it's going to react. If you run more, you're putting impact through your back, you're putting load, and just like when you go to the gym, your muscle cells are going to get bigger and you're going to get bigger muscles. your bones, and even the discs between your spine, the vertebral levels between your spine, they're going to benefit too. So that's a really, really positive thing that should spur you to get out running or get lifting some weights. So thank you so much if you've made it to this point. Any questions, please let me know. That's my work email there, and if you've got any questions, then I'll be more than happy to answer them. Hope you really enjoyed it, and have a great day, everyone.